So I just heard Macklemore's new song, "White Privilege 2," and I wanted to weigh in on it because I think it was very very interesting, and I have to confess when he made his song I think a few years ago, I can't remember the title, but it was, I thought I was gay. Um, I was sort of split about that song because I felt like he was doing that song to whether or not he cared about the the gay experience. Um, I felt like he may have been doing that song to further his own career, and um, and it was just a hot topic at the time. I mean, it still is, and it's like he was sort of capitalizing on that, and whether or not he did care about being gay, he may have, but still making a song about it was I felt like was an attempt to capitalize on it. And I realized that that wasn't a fair. It's not a fair assessment. First of all, you don't really know what's in anyone's heart. You can only judge them by their actions. And regardless of why he made that song, you know, eh, undeniably, I think it had a positive effect, and at least had helped some people stop enough to think about being gay. I think part of what or the gay experience. Part of what made it hard for me to connect with that song, or really, um, I would say understand, is because I'm not gay myself. But I could still respect, you know, the gay struggle, and uh, and still respect him having the level of empathy to make a song like that. Now on to white privilege too. Uh, my fiance called me and told me that he made a new song, and I jokingly like thought, is he talking about the black experience or something like that? And she goes, well, it's called white privilege too. And I thought it was, I was so ready to bash him. It's like, Macklemore, you're not black, so you can't talk about the black experience. But obviously, he could talk about the white privilege. And so I listened to the song, completely. I guess from the angle of ready to bash it or ready to not care about it, and I was really surprised. I thought it was really well done, and again, I had that feeling of wanting to say, well, why is he doing this? This is to try and further his career, and but even if that's the case, it's not for me to say sort of how I feel about it, and obviously, I think maybe this resonates more with me because I'm black, but. Um, But I think it was an interesting song. Now, what I like to do is when I listen to stuff like this and I have an opinion or I like something, I always like to hear the other side of it. I want to hear what other people are saying because I've apparently the song is there's a bunch of controversy around it. So I want to hear the other side, and I hear a lot of people saying that it's now cool in 2015 and now 2016, the year just started, to bash white people and to say, uh, you know white people are terrible, and white people should hate themselves, and so that was one of the arguments, and they felt like he was perpetuating that. And the second argument was, um, the people who are saying, well, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, and he addressed that in his song, and I just wanted to elaborate on that a little bit. But I'll do that at the end. What I wanted to sort of focus on was the people who are saying that, it's cool to bash white people, and they have a problem with that. Um, well, I have a problem with that too. I don't think it's okay to bash white people. I don't think anyone wants white people to hate themselves. But I think anyone who feels that way is sort of missing the point, and they're not going to be uh, convinced by me or my video, or But my opinion on it is that white people are awesome. I don't think there's a black person out there who hate, not saying that they're not black racists, but I don't think that there's a black person out there who hates white people for the sake of them being white. Um, and if there are those people aren't being taken very seriously or held up in a way that I think the people who are making that argument believe they are. Um, I think the majority of black people don't hate white people because they're white. You know, and when that argument pops up, what the majority of black people are in awe about is the fact that white people don't understand, or a lot of white people don't understand what the term white privilege means. Um, so I'm gonna try to keep this video short, but my perspective on it is I don't expect the average. Black people are about 12% of America, right? I think it's definitely less than 15%. I should have probably fact checked that, but I'm pretty sure it's less than 15% last time I checked. And so that means 85, to 88% of America is non-black. It's difficult for me to expect that huge majority. So you could be born in a non-black community, spend your entire life in a non-black community, and you know, and die in a non-black community, right? And the only thing you know about black people is what you see on TV or hear on the radio or whatever. It's hard for me to expect someone like that to connect with a black person's day to day or lifestyle, right? Even me, even if it's something terrible, even if it's something like police brutality or something like that, uh, it it doesn't mean that that person is a bad person, right? If they hear like a black child was, you know, killed or something else, and then they just don't resonate with it, and they do nothing about it, right? Um, I don't expect that. What I don't understand, and I don't think that person is a bad person for that. It's just the nature of being a human being. What I don't understand is the pushback whenever like evidence is presented. Uh, and by that I mean, there's a bunch of things, terrible things happening. There are too many terrible things happening at any given point for any one person to dedicate their lives about stopping all of them. You know, even myself. There, you turn on the news or you see a article somewhere about an an Afghan hospital was bombed and 30 innocent civilians were killed, and you know for me it's like, oh man, that's terrible. That's a bad thing. But then I move on with my life. I don't then dedicate my entire life to you know to figuring that out, or donating money to those families, or you know and I don't think that makes me a bad person. I think it's the reality of the situation is that doesn't hit home for me. I'm not related to those people. I don't know them. um and in that same sense is why I don't try to hold any sort of the white person who lives in the middle of Montana, in a 99.9% white community, responsible for, you know, giving two shits about police brutality on black people or something like that. But if someone presents me with evidence about an Afghan bombing and 30 people dying, my initial reaction to that isn't ever, oh, well, you got to be lying. Like, or I see the crying families or something. I'm like, well, these people are just trying to paint America in a bad light, or you know, this is some hoax, like to, I it just that isn't my initial reaction, and it could be, the situation could be, that could be the case, but that isn't my reaction, and that isn't what concerns me. What concerns me is, hey, these people have died, or people are getting brutalized, or injustice is happening, or and you know that's not a good thing. So I definitely never want to get in the way of that, and I don't understand when that happens with some white people, where it's like, hey, black people say, hey, we're getting stopped by the cops. We're 70% more likely to get stopped by the cops you know, if we're driving a nice car or something like that. Here's the evidence for it. They took 3 years of studies, and it's like, well, well, you must have done something wrong or something like that. Or you hear like some kid get shot, and then it's like, well, why did he run? Why did he have a toy gun in the middle of the park? Like what? And then if all you do is change that kid from being a black kid to a white kid, then it's like, well, what did the cops do? Why didn't the cops? The conversation changes. So my thing is, and not that I think all white people think that way. I think the consensus is sort of that way. Um, and I think that's what black people are against. That's what you know Black Lives Matter, and that's the root cause behind it. And a lot of black people who it's not that they're trying to hold white people responsible, or they want them to bash themselves or anything like that. It's just it's a different standard, and it's hard to acknowledge that, see that when you're on the positive side of that standard. So in conclusion, I think a big part of what happens when someone says white privilege or a black person says white privilege is that a lot of white people feel like, hey, I'm not privileged. I've had a hard life. I've had to work for everything I got. Um, I wasn't born a millionaire. Life has been tough for me, and yeah, life's tough for you too, and you're just trying to complain and say, well, life is tough because you're black. Well, no, suck it up, princess. Like life's tough for everyone. And again, I think that the people who feel that way, you're missing the point. Black people aren't complaining about life being tough. They're complaining about life being tough because they're black. Like the white people who have tough lives, it's very rare that your life is tough because you're white. You understand? The fact that you're white has usually has little to nothing, or in most places in America, will have little to nothing to do with you having a good or a bad life. And that's the way your race should be, because you have no control over your race, right? Um, but for black people, it's a lot of black people. It's the opposite. A lot of black people have a hard time because if everything else is the same and the only thing that changes is the fact that you're white or black, um, a majority of times or a lot of times, the black person has a harder time. So they have a hard time because they're black, and that's what they're fighting for. That's what they're against, and that's what they're calling white privilege. It's not the term white privilege isn't an attempt to demean the white struggle or bash white people and say that they need to hate themselves or anything like that. And if you take it that way, I think it's because you're misinterpreting it. And if someone is expressing it to you that way, then it's because they're misinterpreting what the majority of black people are talking about as well. Okay, so for the second part, I wanted to talk quickly about, the all lives matter uh, thing with Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. And yeah, in the song that I was listening, I heard there was a quote that said something like, um, if a house is on fire, the fire department doesn't show up and hose down all the houses on the block because all houses matter. They focus on the house that's on fire and get that out of fire. And that says it perfectly. I don't understand how anyone could argue against that, or if that needs explaining. Um, I heard it put in a different way not too long ago, and somebody was arguing that if every time you turned on your water, if you drink tap water, which most of us probably don't, but if there was a 1 in 4 glass, a 25% that the water had poison in it, you wouldn't then say, well, the majority of water that comes out of my pipe is fine, so there isn't a problem here, you know. And that's what mostly for people who use the argument that, well, not all cops are, you know, um, bad. The majority of cops are good. So there's no problem here. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that's so obvious to me, and I don't get how so many people have a problem with that. So just in summary, I don't think the majority of people think white people needs to bash themselves or hate white people or anything like that. They just people like me, they don't understand the pushback on what feels like, you know, what feels like obvious injustice, and the people who position themselves on the side of all lives matter, and you're just saying this because you want to perpetuate, me hating myself and I'm too smart for that or something like that. Under normal circumstances, for example, saying all lives matter, it makes sense, and it's a rational thing to say. Um, but black people are trying to say, hey, these aren't normal circumstances. When I feel like I see a cop and I don't know if he's one of the good ones or one of the bad ones, these aren't normal circumstances. This is not what it should be. Um, in the same way that it's not a rational, it's not a fair thing to say in a point like that. In the same way that if you had a burning house and cops show up and they start putting fire on putting water on the house that's on fire, and you're saying, hey, you know, all houses matter. You know, what are you doing? Why aren't these other houses getting water? It's like it doesn't. It's not a rational thing to say in that sense. Where under normal circumstances, I'm sure we think all good houses matter, right? So I hope that gets my point across. And if you disagree with me, I would really love to hear it. I mean, hopefully it doesn't turn into any sort of hate fest. But if you have a comment, I love talking about stuff like this. More than anything, I love hearing the other side because I want to hear what I could have possibly missed, what I'm wrong about, and so you know, please, if you listen to this, leave a comment and let me know what you think. All right.